Homebrewing, making alcohol at home, it just seems so hard when you're new to the hobby. There's all that science involved. There's chemistry, there's biology, not to mention the DIY skills you need to handle most of that fancy equipment out there. But it really doesn't have to be all that complicated. And in this video, I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you how to get started, and I'm going to show you the easiest batch of homebrew you could ever make. Welcome back, y'all, to the Ultimate Homebrewer's Guide. And today I want to talk about keeping it simple with homebrewing. And to do so, I'm going to show you an incredibly easy process that you can use to make a simple batch of what I'm going to lovingly call hooch. And it still tastes really good. Homebrewing can get pretty complex. We all know this. I mean, you see it in other content and YouTube videos. There's a lot of science and very specific knowledge that you need, not to mention all the fancy high-end equipment setups. And ultimately, you're gonna wanna learn more. You're gonna start on this, you're gonna get the itch, and then you're gonna wanna grow, expand your knowledge, and get better and improve, and try to make the best stuff you possibly can. And we're gonna have content on all of that. I wanna make sure that I have something for every level of the hobby. But today, we're gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna show you that homebrewing can be one of the easiest things you can do. I mean, people have been doing it for basically all of human history. And this is primarily for all you new brewers out there who might be overwhelmed or daunted by all the crazy recipes and processes you see, things like temperature control and decoction mashing and pressure fermentation. And I want to show you that you can get into this hobby without having to deal with all that. But for the rest of you, don't go away. Because no matter what level you're at, this is still something nice to have in the tool belt. I mean, I still brew this sometimes when I'm in a hurry and I'm just trying to feed the pipeline. And this is the star of the show today. The hooch we're making today is just simple fruit juice wine. And the way you make it, you just dump a pack of dry yeast into a bottle of grocery store fruit juice. That's it. That's all there is to it. You can actually quit the video now and go make yourself a batch. But I think you should stick around, because I'm going to walk you through the whole process, and there's a couple of things we still need to talk about. First of all is the juice itself. Now you can choose any juice you want. I chose this one because first, apple is generally considered to be the easiest to ferment and to make something good out of. And second, because, Publix brand, the store brand, is generally the cheapest. But you can choose any juice. Just pick the one you like best. Just make sure it doesn't have a lot of preservatives in it, because that'll prevent fermentation and then you won't get alcohol. Something like ascorbic acid is fine, because that's an antioxidant, not an antimicrobial. But you want to avoid any like ites or ates, anything, potassium something or something sulfite. Also, for your first couple batches at least, try to avoid anything that's like super acidic. Cranberry, for example, is generally pretty hard to get fermenting. Apple and grape are generally good choices, but, again, choose whatever you want. The other thing is the yeast. You can use any dry yeast for this. And despite what you see on the internet sometimes, you can even use bread yeast. Now, bread yeast won't make anywhere near as good of an end product as something, made for making alcohol, but it's cheap and it's easy to get. And that makes it a decent option if you're just getting into homebrewing. But if you can, you should absolutely get a good ale or wine yeast. You can get good yeast on Amazon, so it shouldn't be too hard to get your hands on it. Common suggestions for new brewers are US-05, which is a beer yeast, and 71B, which is a wine yeast. But I strongly suggest for all new brewers to use Kveik Yeast, and that's what I'll be using today. Kveik is still yeast, just like all the others, but it's this sort of specially bred super yeast that acts like a cheat code. It kind of makes the process foolproof. I mean, it just ignores any kind of mistakes you make and does the job anyways. Voss Kveik is a good one for this batch, just because of the flavors it makes. Now, if this is all going over your head, don't worry too much right now about ale yeast or wine yeast or bread yeast or Kveik yeast. Just know that any yeast you pick will happily turn the sugar into alcohol. I'll talk about the more complicated things like yeast nutrient and bumping up the gravity later on in the video. But right now, let's make some hooch. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't watched the last video, go do that first and then come back here. I showed you in that video the cheapest, easiest, most minimal equipment setup for doing this stuff. And that's what I'm going to show you how to use in this video.
You can just dump your dry yeast straight into the jug of juice and let it ferment in that. If you're gonna do that though, be sure to drill a hole in the lid so you can attach your blow-off tube. But what you should do is use a fermenter that's designed for the job. So pour your juice into the fermenter and add your dry yeast to that. At this point, you can technically be done with this phase. But hold up just a minute. First, let's talk about yeast nutrient. Now, if you're already feeling overwhelmed, don't worry about it, because this is technically an optional step. You don't need to add yeast nutrient to make alcohol. The yeast will still do their job. But you definitely should if you want to make a good product. You can use whichever yeast nutrient you have access to, and I'll go into the pros and cons of each one in another video. But today, I'm using Fermentation. Just add it to your juice according to the directions on the bottle. We also need to talk about adding sugar to bump up the alcohol. Now this is a completely optional step, and you really don't have to do it. The point of increasing the alcohol is not to get you drunk faster, it's for stability. An alcohol content of around 10 to 12% is much better at preserving your hooch. But don't try to go beyond that unless you know what you're doing, because any more than that can cause fermentation problems. Just add sugar to your juice until you achieve a gravity between 1080 and 1090. Every juice and every type of sugar is a little bit different, but 400 grams of plain white sugar per gallon of juice should get you somewhere close. And now, once you've mixed up all your ingredients, you can just pop on your lid, attach your blow-off tube, and set it aside somewhere to ferment.
Okay, so the fermentation process really just amounts to just being patient and waiting a couple of weeks for it to cook. Now, when I say cook, it's not really cooking. It's just turning the sugar into alcohol. All you really need to do at the bare minimum is just be patient and let it do its thing. However, if you're up for it, there are a couple of things to consider if you want to optimize for quality. You want to keep your yeast happy and healthy, or else they might, make bad off flavors. The first thing is temperature, and the second thing is sunlight. First off, temperature. Your yeast have a preferred temperature just like you do. Unfortunately, the yeast you'll most likely be using kind of like the same temperatures you do. They like room temperature, so like 60s and 70s. And second off, sunlight, or rather, avoiding it. If you're using an opaque bucket like this, you're probably fine. And fruit juice hooch like we're making today isn't really as affected by light as something like beer, but you're still better off just keeping it in the dark. Now, lamps and light bulbs and stuff like you have around your house aren't really a problem. They don't make UV light. You just want to keep it away from the sun. A dark closet indoors without any windows is perfect. I keep all my stuff that's fermenting or aging in this closet behind me, where I can shut the doors and it's climate controlled for my house's heat and air conditioning. All right, so I get that you want a time frame when you can expect this to be done. And, well, That's going to be around 2 weeks or 14 days, give or take, but you can't expect that to be exact. If it's still bubbling away in 2 weeks, don't get upset. Fermentation is a biological process, not like a mechanical one or something. The yeast are going to do whatever they want to do. I've even had fermentations go for like a month before, although that is kind of rare. The only way to be sure that it's done is with a gravity reading. You can't rely on time. So get a hydrometer. And that's not as difficult as it sounds, especially with this batch. All you really need to do is check that the hydrometer shows 1.000 or less, and then verify that a couple of days later. And I'll do another video on gravity readings and hydrometers, but just in summary, for this batch, first you want to wait about 2 weeks, and then you take your first hydrometer reading. If that hydrometer reads 1.000 or less, then it might be done, but you want to verify that with a second hydrometer reading a couple of days later. If that second hydrometer reading reads the same exact number as the first one, then your batch is done. But if not, then you need to do it again. And so you just keep taking readings a couple of days apart until 2 of them back to back are the same exact number and they're both under 1,000. And once you see that, you can know it's done. And now it's time to drink it. So what can you expect from this cheap grocery store hooch? Well, there's a lot of variables going on here. This is not a recipe video, it's a process video. And so depending on what ingredients you use and what you make, yours could turn out quite a bit different than mine. But I'm gonna try it and let you know how mine is. And this batch I made is public store brand apple juice with Kveik. I added some plain white sugar to bump up the alcohol to about 10%. And I didn't use Yeast Nutrient just to prove it's possible to do it without. Oh, and this one sat for a few months after it was done because I didn't get around to making this video till now. And that age does have substantial impact on the flavor. It's gonna make it smoother and mellower. So if you drink yours right away when it's done, it's going to taste greener and younger. But if you do all the same things I did, yours might turn out similar to mine. But this is more about giving you an idea of what to expect and to show you that, you know, doing something like this actually will make something pretty decent. And here it is. Here's the result of the entire process. It really kind of looks like a white wine. And it's pretty clear despite not using any fining agents or clarifying agents or really anything extra. And this is the sample I took for the hydrometer reading, so I haven't actually tried this yet. This is the first time I'm trying this batch. So, all right, here we go. First off, it's pretty good. It's definitely simple and not, you know, complex. It's not the best thing I've ever made or had, but it's also cheap. I mean, I think all in it was less than $10 for an entire gallon of this stuff, so pretty good. And I'm sure many of you are thinking this is going to be super harsh because of all the just cheap ingredients, but it's not. It's actually real smooth, friendly, and easy to drink. The only problem is it's simple. It's not complex. So it's like, I guess the closest thing I can think of to compare it to would be a very simple, very cheap white wine. It has that white wine character. It's a little on the sweet side despite fermenting out so dry. But I think that's just the air of sweetness you get from, I mean, a simple alcohol. You know, there's no tannin or acidity or, you know, any other character to balance against the sweetness. So sweet and simple and, I mean, easy to drink though, you know. And this one was apple juice, so it has a slight appley flavor, but it really loses a lot of whatever fruit you're using most of the time. during fermentation. So you can tell it came from apple juice, I guess, because I know it came from apple juice, but I wonder if I gave it to someone and didn't tell them, they might just think it's a cheap white wine. But is it good? That's, I guess, the real question here. Is it worth brewing? And the answer is yes. You know, I mean, it's not going to knock your socks off. It's not going to be the best thing you've ever made. There's definite improvements you can make to this recipe-wise with, you know, adding tannins and acids, maybe some spices or, you know, other fruits. Literally just the fruit skins to get some of that fruit character, you know, balance it out and stuff. But for a beginner, ridiculously easy, incredibly cheap recipe and process, you end up with something that's surprisingly good. So for this video, I actually made 2 batches. They're actually basically the same thing. They're both Publix brand apple juice and Voss Kveik. The main difference is this one had added sugar to bump up the ABV to about 10 or 12%, I think, and this one had no additional sugar. This is the one I just tried for you, and it's been done fermenting for a little while. This one I just made up a few days ago, and it's still going. But I'm going to treat them a bit differently. This higher ABV one was pretty good already, but I'm going to treat it like a white wine. You can see I've already racked it into a carboy. I'm going to let it age in this for about 6 months, I think, and then I'll bottle it. This lower ABV one is going to come out to, I think, like 6%, and I'll put the actual number on the screen, but I'm going to treat it like a cider. But once it's done, I'm just going to put it in a keg and carbonate it. But if you're new or just trying to keep it simple for this batch, you might want to skip these steps and just bottle it or drink it. And just like with these, there's all kinds of ways you can vary it up and switch it up and, you know, explore it while all still sticking to the same simple process. And there you have it, the easiest and cheapest way to make homebrewed alcohol. And obviously, it's great for you new brewers, but it's also great for the rest of us if you're strapped for time or cash or just generally struggling to get your batches done. In fact, if you're trying to cut back on your alcohol budget, instead of going to the store and getting, you know, cheap beer or wine, you just make a bunch of this. And maybe that's all you ever end up doing. You just keep making batches of fruit juice hooch indefinitely. That's kind of one of the main ideas behind the Prison Hooch subreddit. But for most of you, I think, you're going to get that itch. You're going to want to keep doing it and growing and learning and studying and trying to make the best stuff you possibly can and just generally improving the craft. But if you're new, here's what you should do. Keep it simple at the start. Do a bunch of batches of this stuff. Do one batch and then another and learn from it and improve. And you keep doing that until you feel like you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with it and like you can do it in your sleep. You build the fundamentals. And that's when you add new challenges and new complexities. And you just keep practicing and leveling up. And soon you'll be doing, you know, meads and wines and beers and ciders and whatever else it is you actually want to do. And then you can always just do an easy batch of this stuff when you feel a bit lazy and you just want to keep that pipeline going. So if you agree, like and subscribe, it really helps. And if you make some of this hooch yourself, I'd love to know in the comments how it turned out. But other than that, I'll see you in the next one.